Welcome to Theories of the Third Kind. My name is Aaron. The other host joining me today is Danielson.
Hello.
Now, before we start today's episode, we have a couple of announcements to make.
If you would like to support the show, you can do so by joining our premium subscription service, Supercast.
For $6.66 a month, we don't support Satan, by the way. You get access to our weekly audio premium episodes and access to our back catalog of over 290 premium episodes.
Or for $9.99, you get all of that plus premium video episodes and bonus video content.
You can sign up to that by going to theoriesofthethirdkind.com and clicking on the Supercast link right there in the middle of the website.
Now, if you can't afford a premium membership, that's okay. No worries. You can still help us out by leaving us a written review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That helps us out a shit ton.
However, if you don't want to, then that's fine. We just want you guys, girls, aliens, reptilians, Bigfoots, chupacabras, reptilian, Illuminati, space lizard people, whoever or whatever you are, to enjoy the show.
Also, just a reminder that this podcast is entirely human-made. No AI were used or harmed in the process other than for the base graphic, then which we send to Photoshop, and then we do our magic.
And that is the end of the announcements. So in 1909, a newspaper claimed explorers discovered a hidden cave deep inside the Grand Canyon. This hidden cave was filled with Egyptian-style artifacts and contained a massive underground city. The Smithsonian began investigating this discovery, and then all of a sudden, this story vanished. In this episode today, we examine the mysterious report that was published in the newspaper, the alleged artifacts, and the theories behind one of America's strangest archaeological claims ever. So, with that being said, let's get into today's episode, the 1909 Grand Canyon discovery.
Now, before we get into the mystery itself, we first need to set the stage for everyone. So I need you all to imagine that you are standing in the location of what is today northern Arizona. However, it is 2 billion years ago, though.
All right, so this area of northern Arizona, it changed dramatically over time. The area was at one time an ocean, and then it turned into a desert, and then a swamp, and then a desert. So over those billions of years, you had layers of sand, mud, and tiny sea creatures just dying and just piling on top of one another.
So as time passes, you have layers upon layers being built in this area of northern Arizona. Well, around 70 million years ago, the Earth's crust slowly changed, and that area of land got pushed upward, raising it up like a giant table.
Now, around 64 to 65 million years later, which would be 5 to 6 million years ago, a river started flowing across this area of land that has been pushed upward. This river began cutting down into that rock.
This happened for millions of years, the river slicing deeper and deeper like a slow knife carving away at the rock. Bit by bit, it created a canyon that got deeper and wider.
Today, this canyon is around 277 miles long, up to 18 miles wide, and over a mile deep. It is your mother's vagina. No,
Oh.
it is the Grand Canyon. Also, by the way, the river that carved it out is known as the Colorado River, and it runs right through the middle of that bitch. And here's a photograph of it. There you go. The Grand Canyon and the river. It looks a lot smaller, the photograph does. Doesn't do it justice. It is big in person. I've never been there, though. So,
Me neither. Joe Dirt has, though.
yeah.
So that was how the Grand Canyon was created. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the history of it. So long before the Grand Canyon was a national park, long before there were hiking trails and tourists with cameras, people had already been living in that area.
As a matter of fact, humans lived in and around the Grand Canyon for around at least 12,000 to 13,000 years ago. That means when the last ice age was ending, when mammoths were disappearing, there were already people walking along the canyon rims.
Now, the earliest group of people were what archaeologists called Paleo Indians. They were hunters who moved with the seasons. So around 2,000 years ago, ancient Puebloan people were in the area building homes into the cliffs and farming near the canyon.
They grew corn, beans, and squash. They made pottery, and they even built granaries in the caves that still exist today. Now, in modern times, the Grand Canyon is home to 11 federally recognized tribes, such as the Havasupai, who still live inside of the canyon, the Navajo, Hopi, Zuni, and many others.
All right, so now we're going to shift gears a bit and discuss a few more historical points since it plays a vital role in our story today. So let's go back to the year 1540.
During this time in history, Spanish soldiers, which were led by Garcia Lopez de Cardenas, were being guided by the Hopi across what is known today as northern Arizona. Basically, Garcia and his Spanish soldiers came across the Hopi, and those natives were like,
Yo, you guys want to see a big ass hole in the ground?
They were
This-
like, they said,
Sure.
and the Hopi took Garcia along with his soldiers to the Grand Canyon.
Garcia saw the Grand Canyon. He looked at the Hopi and asked,
What the hell is at the bottom of this?
And the Hopi said,
I don't know. It looks like a river and maybe some other shit.
Garcia then said,
Well, why don't we climb down this bitch and see if we can reach the bottom of it?
however, it didn't end up good for the Spaniards. They misjudged how deep the Grand Canyon was, tried to descend, got only partway, and gave up.
So after that, for the next few hundreds of years, the Grand Canyon isn't really explored. Then, in 1857 to 1858, United States Army officer and explorer Lieutenant Joseph Christmas Ives, he led an expedition to explore the Colorado River and the Grand Canyon. After his journey, he declared the area as, and we quote, altogether valueless. Basically, he said the area sucked and it had no value, which is not true at all because tons of people go there. Millions of people go there each year to look at the Grand Canyon. So you're wrong, Joseph Christmas.
So we fast forward a few years later to 1869. Now, during this time, a lot of the rivers in the area are unmapped. So an individual named John Wesley Powell decides to launch a river expedition that starts off from the Green River, Wyoming, eventually running into the Colorado River.
John gets 4 boats together, recruits 10 men, and they begin heading downstream, mapping out and studying the river systems. They successfully travel through what we now call the Grand Canyon, becoming the first known expedition of European Americans to navigate it by boat and document it scientifically.
So by the early 1900s, the Grand Canyon was still surrounded by mystery and intrigue for majority of Americans. And that brings us to what happened in the year 1909, which is what our entire topic is over today.
So on Friday, March 12th, 1909, the Arizona Gazette publishes a story in their newspaper. The article is titled G.E. Kincaid Reaches Yuma. It goes on to say, and we quote,
G.E. Kincaid of Lewiston, Idaho, arrived in Yuma after a trip from Green River, Wyoming, down the entire course of the Colorado River. He is the second man to make this journey and came alone in a small skiff, stopping at his pleasure to investigate the surrounding country.
He left Green River in October, having a small covered boat with oars and carrying a fine camera, with which he secured over 700 views of the river and canyons, which were unsurpassed. Mr. Kincaid says one of the most interesting features of the trip was passing through the sluiceways at Laguna Dam.
He made this perilous passage with only the loss of an oar, and some interesting archaeological discoveries were unearthed, and altogether the trip was such interest that he will repeat it next winter in the company of friends.
And that right there was the newspaper article. And at the time, this article didn't get much attention, and it was pretty much forgotten about. However, what happens a month later is a completely different story.
So, a little less than a month later, on Monday, April 5th, 1909, the Arizona Gazette publishes another article about G.E. Kincaid, and this one has some very, very odd claims. The headline of the article states,
Headline: Explorations in Grand Canyon. Mysteries of immense rich cavern being brought to light. Jordan is enthused. Remarkable finds indicate ancient people migrated from Orient.
Jordan who?
Well, you'll find out Jordan is a part of the Smithsonian. So,
Oh,
yeah. So that's what the headline says. That's a big ass headline and a lot of them.
yeah. Now, the article starts off saying, the latest news of the progress of the explorations of what is now regarded by scientists as not only the oldest archaeological discovery in the United States, but one of the most valuable in the world, which was mentioned some time ago in the Gazette, was brought to the city yesterday by G.E. Kincaid, the explorer who found the great underground citadel of the Grand Canyon during a trip from Green River, Wyoming, down the Colorado in a wooden boat to Yuma several months ago. And holy fucking shit, run on sentence.
Yeah, that was a very long sentence. The story goes on to say, according to the story yesterday to the Gazette by Mr. Kincaid, the archaeologists of the Smithsonian Institute, which is financing the explorations, have made discoveries which almost conclusively prove that the race which inhabited this mysterious cavern, which is hewn in solid rock by human hands, was of Oriental origin, or possibly from Egypt, tracing back to Ramses.
If their theories are born out of the translation of the tablets engraved with hieroglyphics, the mystery of the prehistoric peoples of North America, their ancient arts, who they were and whence they came, will be solved. Egypt and the Nile and the Arizona and the Colorado will be linked by a historical chain running back to the ages, which staggers the wildest fancy of the fictionist.
Now, after that statement, the article goes into multiple different sections, which we're going to go through each section. And this first one is called a thorough investigation. It states,
Under the direction of Professor S.A. Jordan, the Smithsonian Institute is now pursuing the most thorough explorations, which will be continued until the last link in the chain has been forged. Nearly a mile underground, about 1,480 feet below the surface, the long main passage has been delved into to find another mammoth chamber from which radiates scores of passageways like the spokes of a wheel.
several hundred rooms have been discovered, reached by passageways running from the main passage, one of them having been explored for 854 feet and another 634 feet. The recent finds include articles which have never been known as native to this country.
War weapons, copper instruments sharp edged and hard as steel indicate the high state of civilization reached by these strange people. So interested have the scientists become that preparations are being made to equip the camp for extensive studies, and the force will be increased to 30 or 40 persons.
Before going further into the cavern, better facilities for lighting have to be installed, for the darkness is dense and impenetrable for the average flashlight. In order to avoid being lost, wires are being strung from the entrance to all passageways leading directly to large chambers.
How far this cavern extends, no one can guess, but it is now the belief of many that what has already been explored is merely the barracks, to use an American term, for the soldiers, and that far into the underworld will be found the main communal dwellings of the families and possibly other shrines. The perfect ventilation of the cavern, the steady drought that blows through, indicates that it has another outlet to the surface.
Dang. So that was the first section. And basically, it talks about them going into the Grand Canyon and G.E. Kincaid recruiting 30 to 40 more people and exploring this cave system.
It goes way down, and they don't know how far it goes down, but they do know because of the breeze and everything that there is an opening on the other end somewhere.
Yep.
Okay.
So after that section, the article then goes into the next section, which is over Mr. Kincaid's report. That's what it's titled. It states, Mr. Kincaid was the first white born in Idaho and has been an explorer and hunter all his life. 30 years having been in the service of the Smithsonian Institute. Even briefly recounted his history sounds fabulous, almost grotesque.
You know, I'm going to ask, what do they mean, first white child born?
I'm guessing that his family was the first to settle in Idaho that was white, and his mom and dad, or his mom gave birth to him, and he was the first white child born. That's the only thing I could guess. And he had been working for the Smithsonian Institute for the past 30 years.
All right, so Mr. Kincaid goes on to say, first, I would impress that the cavern is almost inaccessible. The entrance is almost 1,486 feet down a sheer canyon wall. It is located on government land, and no visitor will be allowed there under penalty of trespass.
The scientists wish to work unmolested. That's what he said, okay? Back then, unmolested would mean like be left alone, okay? The scientists wish to work unmolested without fear of the archaeological discoveries being disturbed by relic hunters. A trip there would be fruitless, and the visitor would be sent on his way.
The story of how I found the cavern has already been recounted, but in a paragraph, I was journeying down the Colorado River in a boat, alone, looking for minerals. Some 42 miles up the river from El Tovar Crystal Canyon, I saw on the east wall stains in the sedimentary formation about 2,000 feet above the riverbed.
There was no trail to this point, but I finally reached it with great difficulty. Above a shelf, which hid it from view of the river, was the mouth of the cave. There are steps leading from this entrance some 30 yards from the level of the river.
When I saw the chisel marks on the wall inside the entrance, I became interested, secured my gun, and went in. During that trip, I went back several hundred feet along the main passage till I came to the main crypt in which I discovered the mummies.
One of these I stood up and photographed by flashlight. I gathered a number of relics, which I carried down the Colorado to Yuma, from whence I shipped them to Washington with the details of the discovery. Following this, the explorations were undertaken. End quote. So that right there is what Mr. Kincaid stated as to how it all began and how he discovered it in detail, the cavern and where it's located at.
This man's disrespectful. He picked up a fucking mummy and stood it up so he could take a picture of it.
Yeah.
All right, so the next section of this article is titled The Passages. It states the main passageway is about 12 feet wide, narrowing to 9 feet toward the further end. About 57 feet from the entrance, the first passages branch off to the right and left, along which, on both sides, are a number of rooms about the size of ordinary living rooms of today, though some are 30 to 40 feet square.
These are entered by oval shaped doors and are ventilated by round air spaces through the walls into the passages. The walls are about 3 feet 6 inches in thickness. The passages are chiseled as straight as could be laid out by any engineer.
Now, the ceilings of many of the rooms converge to a center. The side passages near the entrance run at a sharp angle from the main hall, but toward the rear they gradually reach a right angle in direction.
Then the article continues on with the next section, which is titled The Shrine. Over 100 feet from the entrance is a cross hall, several hundred feet long, in which was found the idol or image of the people's god, sitting cross legged with a lotus flower or lily in each hand. Which, when he says of the people's god, I'm guessing he means the people that once inhabited that cavern or cave.
Yep. The cast of the face is oriental, and the carving shows a skillful hand, and the entire is remarkably well preserved, as is everything in this cavern. The idol most resembles Buddha, though the scientists are not certain as what religious worship it represents. Taking into consideration everything found thus far, it is possible that the worship most resembles the ancient people of Tibet. Okay, because there are multiple versions of Buddha, you could say, how he looks.
Yeah. Surrounding this idol are smaller images, some beautiful in form, other crooked, necked, and distorted shapes, probably of good and evil. There are 2 large cacti with protruding arms, one on each side of the platform on which this god squats. All this is carved out of hard rock resembling marble.
In the opposite corner of this cross hall were found tools of all descriptions made of copper. These people undoubtedly knew the lost art of hardening this metal, which has been sought by chemists for centuries without results.
On a bench running around the workroom was some charcoal and other material probably used in this process. There's also slag and stuff similar to mat, showing that these ancient peoples smelted ore, but so far, no trace of where or how this was done has been discovered, nor the origin of the ore.
Among other finds are vases or urns and cups of copper and gold made very artistic in design. The pottery work includes enameled ware and glazed vessels. Another passageway leads to granaries such as those found in the Oriental temples. They contain seeds of various kinds.
One very large storehouse has not been entered, as it is 12 feet high and can be reached only from above. 2 copper hooks extend on the edge, which indicates that some sort of ladder was attached. These granaries are rounded, and the materials of which they are constructed, I think, is very hard cement.
A gray metal is also found in this cavern, which puzzles the scientists. Its identity has not been established. It resembles platinum. Thrown all over the floor everywhere are what people call cat's eye or tiger's eye, a yellow stone of no great value. Each one is engraved with the head of a Malaysian type.
The article then continues and talks about the hieroglyphics and the crypt. On all the urns, on the walls, over the doorways, and tablets of stone are mysterious hieroglyphics, the key to which the Smithsonian Institute hopes yet to discover.
These writings resemble those found on the rocks about this valley. The engraving on the tablets probably has something to do with the religion of the people. Similar hieroglyphics have been found in the peninsula of Yucatan, but these are not found in the Orient.
Some believe that these cave dwellers built the old canals in the Salt River Valley. Among the pictorial writings, only two animals are found. One is of prehistoric type.
The tomb or crypt in which the mummies are found is one of the largest of the chambers, the walls slanting back at an angle of about 35 degrees. One of these are tiers of mummies, each one occupying a separate hewn shelf. And at the head of each is a small bench on which is found copper cups and pieces of broken swords.
Some of the mummies are covered with clay and are all wrapped in a bark fabric. The urns or cups on the lower tiers are crude, while as the higher shelves are reached, the urns are finer in design, showing an interstage of civilization.
It is worthy of note that all the mummies examined so far have proved to be male, no children or females been buried there. This leads to the belief that this interior section was the warriors' barracks. Among the discoveries, no bones of animals have been found, no skins, no clothing, nor bedding.
Many of the rooms are bare, but for the water vessels. One room, about 400 by 700 feet, was probably the main dining hall for cooking utensils are found here.
What these people lived on is a problem, though it is presumed that they came south for the winter and farmed in the valleys going back north in the summer. Upwards of 50,000 people could have lived in the cavern comfortably.
God damn.
Dang.
That's a big ass cavern. One theory is that the present Indian tribe found in Arizona are descendants of the serfs or slaves of the people which inhabited the cave. Undoubtedly, a good many thousands of years before the Christian era, a people lived here which reached a high state of civilization.
Human history is full of gaps. Professor Jordan is much enthused over the discoveries and believes that the find will prove of great value in archaeological work.
One thing I've spoken of may be of interest. There is one chamber, the passageways to which is not ventilated, and when we approach it, a deadly, snaky smell struck us.
Our lights will not penetrate the gloom. Until stronger ones are available, we will not know what the chamber contains. Some say snakes, but others boo-hoo this idea and think it may contain a deadly gas or chemicals used by the ancients. No sounds are heard, but it smells snaky just the same.
The whole underground institution gives one of shaky nerves the creeps. The gloom is like a weight on one's shoulders, and our flashlights and candles only make the darkness blacker. Imagination can revel in conjectures and ungodly daydreams back through the ages that have elapsed till the mind reels dizzily in space. The end. And that's the end of the article.
That's actually kind of scary that no light will penetrate whatever that hazy stuff is in there, but it smells snaky. They don't know what's in it.
It's Medusa, man. She's slithering around
It's her lair.
with her snake titties.
Stare at those, you get turned to stone. So that right there is the article and what it claimed. Once the newspaper hit the streets, everyone started reading this article and their minds were blown. However, people began wondering why other newspapers in the region or around the United States were not picking up the story and running with it.
Well, only one nearby local newspaper ran the story as a reprint article without comment. But 11 days later, on April 16th, 1909, a Flagstaff newspaper ran a brief front page article about the story, claiming it as a complete hoax, saying, and we quote,
If this were real, someone at the Grand Canyon would have heard about it, and the entrance is described in a way only an imagination could reach.
yep, that is what they claimed. And following that, the story didn't just vanish into thin air, it just went dormant. Then, decades later, it resurfaced.
In 1992, David Hatcher Childress published a story in a book and stated that since the Smithsonian didn't confirm or comment on the story, that it must be a cover-up. That book ended up bringing it to modern time, added new layers to it, and turned that single newspaper story into an entire ecosystem of theories.
And that is where we are at today with this story. Many scientific researchers claim that this entire story is made up and it is a hoax. However, there are a lot of unanswered questions. And that right there is the 1909 Grand Canyon discovery. However, just like every week, our episode does not stop here because now we're going to get into the strange facts and findings that we uncovered while researching this topic.
All right, so our first strange fact and finding is called the Grand Canyon Facts. Every year, over 5 million people visit the Grand Canyon. However, only about 1% of those visitors hike or ride a mule down to the bottom of it.
1%. That's it.
You have to ride a mule?
Yeah. Also, around 90% of the Grand Canyon is off limits to the public. These areas are called forbidden zones and are typically scattered, unpublicized spots rather than one large restricted area. So instead of being at one big area, it's a bunch of small spots that are restricted.
How do they restrict all those?
They just tell you not to go there.
Bitch, what if I get lost?
Supposedly, I've heard stories of people trying to get to this area where this cave is at, and the bushes will boom, stand up, and these people have rifles, and they tell them to turn around and go the other way. It's people like dressed up in bushes and shit. But you got to think, it's fucking hotter than hell out there. How are they just chilling as a bush for like 12-hour shifts?
Oh, man. Hey, man, what do you do for work? I guard an area, forbidden zone. Oh, yeah, how do you do that? I dress up like a bush.
Pretty effective.
Oh, man. Now, there are over 1,000 documented caves in the Grand Canyon, and all of those are all closed off to the public. Also, aircraft are restricted in the area. There are strict no-fly zones that exist for helicopters and drones over the Grand Canyon.
Which all of that is kind of weird.
That is kind of weird.
Over 1,000 caves and nobody can access them. And it's a no-fly zone for helicopters and drones, which I know in a lot of national parks, you can't bring drones to. I think almost all of them. They've restricted drones.
Why not?
I don't know. There must be a good reason why, I guess, or I assume. But yeah.
It'll actually catch Bigfoot?
You take all those weird facts and you combine them with the next weird, strange fact and finding, and you start wondering, maybe the story might be true. So our next strange fact and finding is about the weird names on a map of the Grand Canyon. So if you have ever looked at a map of the Grand Canyon, you will see that it has Egyptian names on it. Now, these are rock formations that have been named like Isis's temple, Ra, Horus, Osiris's temple, and much more, which, here you go. Here's an example of it. You can see them right there.
Oh, yeah. Shiva temple, Osiris temple, Isis temple.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
Now, once people notice that, though, they circle back to this article and then are like, wait, Egyptian names? Maybe the 1909 article was right and the Egyptian artifacts were found and covered up.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people think,
So we decided to look into who and why the Grand Canyon had those Egyptian names, and this is what we found.
In the late 1800s, explorers started mapping out the Grand Canyon. And during this, they had to name all the huge rock formations in the area. One of the main surveyors, Clarence Dutton, he was really into ancient cultures. So he gave many of these rock towers in the area dramatic names from different religions and civilizations. They weren't just Egyptian names.
That is why you see names like Isis Temple, Osiris Temple, Horus Temple, but also Shiva Temple and Vishnu Temple and more. It wasn't because Egyptians were there, it was because the dude naming them like ancient cultures.
And I know you're probably wondering, what year did Clarence do this? Because if he did it after 1909, I mean, maybe it could be a way for them to, cover up the fact that, Egyptian artifacts were found there. Nope, that's not the case. We looked that up, and it took place from 1880 to 1881. That's when Clarence conducted field studies in the Grand Canyon as part of the U.S. Geological Survey.
And in 1882, he published his famous report, History of the Grand Canyon District, where many of the mythological names appeared in print. So the naming of many of those Egyptian and other mythological features dates to around 1881 to 1882, nearly 30 years before the 1909 newspaper story.
Sorry, hate to break it to you.
Now, what if he found something?
Ooh, yeah, and he was like, okay, that's why I'm going to name him that.
Yeah, because when you go somewhere, if something reminds you of something, then that's when you start, like, those names and stuff come to mind.
Yeah,
So maybe he did see something that's Egyptian and he didn't want to say anything.
maybe. All right. So our next strange fact and finding is called the Smithsonian Museum. So, like we previously mentioned, after that article was published in 1909, the Smithsonian didn't respond to it for a very, very long time. It wasn't until the year 2000 when people began emailing and writing to the Smithsonian asking if this 1909 story was real, and they eventually responded.
Yep. Eventually, a Smithsonian representative said their Department of Anthropology searched its archives and found no record of Professor S.A. Jordan, G.E. Kincaid, or any Smithsonian expedition in the Grand Canyon matching the story.
And since the early 2000s, the Smithsonian, historians, and even the National Park Service have repeatedly stated that they have no records of the expedition or artifacts that were claimed in the 1909 newspaper article, and that the story is considered a newspaper hoax or sensational journalism, and that none of it's true. And we just have to go off their word.
We already know how the Smithsonian is.
Yeah. Covering up giants and shit.
Yeah. How dare you?
So that right there is our last strange fact and finding. Now we are going to get into the theories of this episode and talk about, the possible different theories surrounding it. So Dan, would you like to start it off?
So, our first theory is titled Hoax. This theory is that the entire April 5th, 1909 Arizona Gazette story was simply fabricated newspaper story meant to attract attention and sell papers. Evidence supporting this theory. No records exist of G.E. Kincaid or Professor S.A. Jordan connected to the discovery. The Smithsonian Institution has stated it has no records of the expedition or artifacts. No follow up articles or reports appeared in other newspapers at the time, and sensational or fictional stories were common in early 1900s newspapers to boost readership.
Mm,
What was that one story, that place in Austin, the Bigfoot Museum thing, that had the story about the guy finding Bigfoot? He likes to sensationalize some of his stories.
his name started with an M.
What was his name? Hey, you found one.
Sorry, I was in the hospital for heart issues. If you weren't watching on YouTube, I just felt something on my side and I realized I just had like those EKG stickers. I was in the hospital like earlier today. Had an EKG done. I got a fucked up ticker. So that's a little personal stuff that I'm going to keep to myself, but there you go. But anyways, what were you saying? The story at the Austin thing?
I'm trying to think of that guy's name that he said like he found Bigfoot. He had like tracks and everything, but it was like sensationalized, I think.
I think what you're talking about is Tom Slick and his Yeti adventures. In 1957, Tom Slick was a Texas oil man and adventurer, and he wanted to find the Yeti. He ended up funding an expedition which was led by a guy named Peter Byrne. 1 year later, 1958, Peter heard a rumor of a local monastery in an isolated village said that it had the both severed hand and scalp of a Yeti in its temple. Peter told Tom to get your ass to the church, son. Give me that hand and scalp. And they go and get that hand and scalp. Brings it back to him.
I think that's exactly what it was.
Tom Slick.
Tom Slick. So technically not too related, but pretty much it's just the stories like sensationalized, and a lot of the stuff back then, they were all about exploration and stuff, and people wanted to have their name as like an adventurer and stuff. So
Yeah.
I could kind of see it, but then again,
Being a hoax as so that he could be an adventurer.
yep, his name go down in history.
All right, so let's go on to our next theory, which is called the misinterpreted archaeological discovery theory. This theory states that a real cave or archaeological site may have been discovered, but the newspapers exaggerated or misunderstood the details, turning ordinary Native American artifacts into something more mysterious. Now, the evidence supporting this theory is that the Grand Canyon contains thousands of caves and archaeological sites used by the indigenous peoples. Early reporters often misinterpreted Native American artifacts as belonging to other ancient civilizations. Journalists in that era sometimes dramatically embellished scientific discoveries to make them more exciting. Maybe.
Okay, so there was the Bering Strait, though. You think about it, that people used the Bering Strait to travel from Asia over to the North American continent. So a lot of people did migrate doing that. They were following the pretty much the wildlife. Like it was like the mammoths and stuff like that. So I mean, who's to say that some Oriental people didn't follow, you know?
By the way, Dan's considered Oriental. Would you consider yourself Oriental? Half,
Yeah, half, I guess.
half Oriental. So yeah, I could see that.
I mean, it's a possibility. Not to not to discredit that, these weren't Native American artifacts, but I mean, if they did find a friggin' Buddha statue, I mean, it's
Yeah.
eh.
All right. So what's this next theory we got?
All right, this next theory is called the Smithsonian cover-up theory. This theory claims that the discovery was real, but was later suppressed by the Smithsonian or government institutions to prevent rewriting established history. Evidence supporting this: the article claimed the expedition was connected to the Smithsonian, which gave the story credibility at the time. Some areas of the Grand Canyon are restricted to the public, which conspiracy theorists argue could hide undisclosed sites. The Smithsonian has been accused in other controversies of collecting and storing artifacts not publicly displayed, which fuels speculation.
They have been accused and have been guilty of collecting and storing artifacts not publicly displayed. They are known for that.
Oh, that giant, we don't know. We misplaced it.
Yeah.
How do you misplace a fucking giant skeleton?
All right. So let's get on to our next theory, which is called adventure story or publicity stunt. This theory states that the article may have been written as a fictional adventure narrative or promotional story inspired by the popular fascination with Egypt and lost civilizations at the time. Evidence supporting this theory: the early 1900s saw huge public fascination with ancient Egypt and lost civilizations. The story reads almost like an adventure novel describing massive chambers, mummies, and hieroglyphs. The article appeared during a period when newspapers sometimes published dramatic, fictionalized stories alongside real news. Maybe.
I mean, I could see that too. Kincaid, he said he took over like, what, 700 pictures?
Yeah. Where are they at?
Yeah, where are those at?
Smithsonian has it hidden, or it's under the Vatican.
Oh.
Yeah.
You could actually well, so you could take a virtual tour of underneath the Vatican. I just don't know how much they show.
We're going to have to do that one day. A live Theories Thursday.
We're going to take a virtual tour of the Vatican. What do you have hidden under there? Jesus.
All right. So what's our last theory, Dan?
All right, so the last theory is called the frontier legend. This theory states that the story grew out of local rumors or explorer tales about mysterious caves in the canyon and was turned into a dramatic newspaper article. Evidence supporting: the Grand Canyon region has long histories of legends about hidden caves and ruins. Early explorers frequently told exaggerated stories about the American West. Many features in the canyon were named after Egyptian and mythological figures decades earlier, which may have inspired the Egyptian angle in the story. I mean,
I can kind of see that one.
I can see that one.
So I guess we get to our personal thoughts and theories now. And I'm going to ask you, Dan, do you believe this 1909 story was true that was written in the newspaper?
I think it would be pretty cool if it was true. With what we have and what we could see, I can't really believe it. But this would also help encourage people, say, like a story like this gets out, like, oh shit, there's, another type of ancient civilization. Could be, from like the Oriental side or the Egyptian side, you know, that would draw people west again or want to explore or get people to go to the Grand Canyon and all that to move west. So it was another way to bring people in. So I could see that. But as of right now, I don't think it's true. Sounds cool. Sounds pretty damn cool, honestly. The fact we can't actually, the only thing that makes it very suspicious is the fact that Smithsonian don't say they don't never heard of any of these guys. And then of course the national park has all these areas zoned out, like where you can't go to. So it does make it suspicious to make it think that there's a possibility.
I am going to go out on a limb and say it's real. I think that in the Grand Canyon, not only in the Grand Canyon, but all over the current United States, there are caves that are thousands of feet deep. I mean, you look at Carlsbad Cavern, they're still exploring that, and that's thousands of feet deep. And these caves sometimes have been inhabited by peoples or humans thousands of years ago that have put these ancient Egyptian markings. And the reason I think that is the Anubis caves in Oklahoma. Nobody talks about them. In Oklahoma, there was some caves that were discovered. And these caves have what people claim to be evidence that people from Europe and other continents made it to the Americas way before Columbus did. So what had happened is that in 1978, Glory Farley was shown the caves by a local farmer there in Oklahoma. There was dog-like figures and the Egyptian jackal god Anubis carved into the inside of the cave walls. And a Harvard professor ended up traveling there and translated the inscriptions and stated that, hey, these are ancient Egyptian inscriptions. What are they doing there? They don't know. I think our history is not fully disclosed to us, that there's a lot of stuff that we don't know about that happened thousands of years ago. So, yeah, that's my take on it. It's real and it's hidden up and it's covered up by the Smithsonian. There you go.
Honestly, I can see it, and I can see this actually being hidden because it would change history. It would change a lot of stuff, but I don't know.
It's hard to believe.
It's hard to believe, but I would like to believe it.
Yeah. Well, I believe it. I think it's true. Dan doesn't. That's okay. You can have your own opinion. Everybody can have their own opinion.
You're
Doesn't
wrong,
mean-
Dan.
Doesn't mean you're right or wrong. But we would love to hear from you. You can send us an email or comment down below and tell us what you think it is. Are these caves real? Are they not real? Are they hidden? Why are they hidden? Let us know. We would love to hear from you.
That's right. Let us know. Let us know which one's wrong.
But with that being said, do you have anything else you would like to add to today's episode, Dan?
No, I mean, honestly, it's very interesting that I didn't know that there were so many forbidden zones and areas. Like, you can't even fly over, like, the Grand Canyon. I thought it was just honestly open to the public.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they have so much shit marked off. And honestly, I didn't know that they had things named after Egyptian places. It's kind of interesting.
Very odd. The world is a weird place.
Oh, yeah.
But with that being said, I want to thank you for joining us. And again, thank you for your support and love. Without you, we could not do this.
That's right. Thank you and much love.
So, Dan, would you like to roll us out?
Sure will. It's okay to be out of this world with your thoughts.
Because you are not alone.